Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to our webinar on AI and the future of work in India, organized as a part of our project, Good and Better Jobs in India. I am delighted to see such a diverse and enthusiastic audience joining us today. As we stand at the brink of a new era marked by rapid advancements in artificial intelligence, the need to understand its impact on the job market has never been more critical. The rise of AI promises to revolutionize industries, enhance productivity, and create a plethora of new job opportunities. We are fortunate to have with us a panel of esteemed experts who will share their insights and perspectives on these critical issues. Our speakers will be introduced by our moderator, Dr. Pradipta Ghosh. Dr. Ghosh is a distinguished researcher and educator at the interface of science, economics, philosophy, and public policy. Currently a distinguished fellow at TERI and CUTS, he has held numerous prestigious roles, including membership in the Scientific Advisory Council of the Cabinet, at National Security Advisory Board and PM's Council on Climate Change. A former IAS officer, he retired as a secretary to the Ministry of Environment and Forest and has served economic advisor to the PM and senior environment specialist at ADB. With a PhD in economics and policy analysis from Carnegie Mellon University and a BTech in chemical engineering from IIT Delhi, Dr. Ghosh has received notable accolades, including the BP Pal Centenary Award for Environmental Sustainability and Alumni Achievement Awards from both his alma maters. Before we dive into this fruitful session, here is to certain house announcements. Each panelist will be allotted 8 minutes for presenting their views on the questions posed to them by the moderator. After our panelists have put forward their views, the floor will be opened for discussion, which will include all our participants present with us today. We request all the panelists and the presenters to kindly keep their videos on so that the discussion becomes much more engaging. We also request only the person who speaks to turn on his or her microphone, and other participants are requested to put their microphone off when not speaking to avoid any inconvenience. Lastly, participants having questions are requested to either ask the same over the chat box or use the raise hand option present in Zoom. I thank you all for presenting and joining with us today, and I look forward to a stimulating and productive discussion. Now I would request Sanchita ma'am to take over.
Thank you, Tasmita. Good afternoon, everybody. I will just spend a few minutes explaining, why we are organizing this and also, put forward some issues from our current work. So this webinar is a series of webinars we've been organizing as part of a project we call Grow Jobs. Actual title is much longer. And this is a project which has been implemented in 2 phases. It started from 2018 and we are at the fag end of the second phase almost. As part of this project, we have been looking at economic conditions of workers, by which we mean workers with informal work arrangements, contractual workers, gig workers, and the kind of social protection measures that exist for them. And our aim is to build a narrative on the welfare of these workers. Now, we haven't actually looked at AI and workers' welfare or AI and future of jobs as such. But I'd like to share my screen and I will share with you a few issues that have come up in our recent research. And I'd like to put forward some questions, and then I will hand it over to Dr. Ghosh and the panel discussion. Just hold on, please. Okay, so the project, as I said, is called Good and Better Jobs in India, Grow Jobs, Good and Better Jobs in India. And the aim is to build a narrative for an alternative, inclusive, and sustainable model of economic growth that focuses on workers' welfare. There's an ongoing study as part of which we have interviewed 500 gig workers in 5 states in India. And most of these workers are between the age of 18 to 34, and they are either secondary or high school educated. And of course, all these workers are conversant in the use of technology because they have to necessarily use apps to get their jobs. But then when we dive deeper into what they are going through, we see that a lot of them are thinking like, in fact, 22% say that they lack training or digital skills to access information on government social protection benefits. 7% say that they actually need trainings on the use of digital platforms. So we are talking about workers who are supposed to be conversant in digital technology. So our question is, what is happening with the other kind of workers? And I mean, I know we are going to talk about a range of issues in future of work. I would be keen to hear if our panelists will touch the issue of informal workers or contractual workers. So some of the questions like, how would such workers be affected by adoption of AI, particularly for algorithms? What kind of skills will be required from gig workers in an AI penetrated world of work? How could AI be effectively used for their betterment? For example, for spreading awareness and use of social protection measures. And lastly, how can our education system prepare future workers of such categories for an AI penetrated world? So that's it from me. And I know we are all keen to hear our panelists, and I would like to invite Dr. Ghosh to take over and moderate the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, and welcome to all the participants to this very timely and important webinar. I'm thankful to CUTS for inviting me to moderate this seminar. I'm mystified as to why they have done so because this is a new field for me. So most of you, those who know me as an environmental policy analyst. But anyway, whatever, I'll give it my best shot. Now, applications of AI or robotization have generated great hopes of considerable benefits for mankind, as well as major concerns, including threats to democracy and existential questions for the human species. And among these major concerns is the prospect of large-scale, permanent unemployment of large numbers of workers, rise in inequality, and widespread societal conflict. First, let me speak about the potential benefits of AI. And this is where the scope for new enterprises arises. And these arise over a wide range swath of economic sectors: agriculture, industry, services, including public services, is the replacement of human intellectual effort with computer programs, often embodied in machines that can also replace skilled human labor. AI machines produce the same or better quality of output at much lower cost, can be infused with skills costlessly and in a very short time. They do not tire out. They do not unionize, at least they haven't done so as yet, and do not object to sudden escalation of effort. They can also collect and process vast amounts of data that would overwhelm humans. Machine learning programs, in addition, can learn on the job and, when sufficiently skilled, replace humans. They can also learn when confronting new situations. In these features, the potential large-scale replacement of human intellectual and skilled labor is obvious. However, there are tasks that robots cannot or should not do. These involve tasks that involve empathy, higher order creativity, and moral sensibility. In other words, tasks that require a human soul. And of course, there's a list of all these, and I won't list out the specific kinds of tasks which the AI is not equipped or should not leaving infrastructure. Now, concerns about large-scale displacement of humans by machines go back to the 19th century Luddites, that is, textile workers in Britain, who feared that spinning and weaving machines run by steam power would overwhelm hand-spun and hand-woven textile manufacturing, leading to large-scale unemployment. At home, in recent times in India, there was considerable opposition to introduction of computers by public sector banks in the 1980s by bank clerks who too feared displacement. Till now, such fears have not materialized. It is important to understand why not and see why the case of AI may be different, and this has a bearing on the topic for this webinar. Now, when machines displace humans because they produce better widgets at low cost, several things happen. First, workers are displaced by machines. Second, widgets are produced at lower costs of production. Third, this leads to lower market price of widgets, assuming that widgets are produced competitively. Fourth, the lower costs increase output, sales, and profits. Fifth, the use of machines requires new skills or job titles, and the increased scale of output absorbs the displaced workers in the new job titles. These new job titles may pay more because they are more skilled than the old ones. And this is what apparently happened in 19th century Britain and 20th century PSU banks in India. However, the key to this outcome is that displaced workers could be reskilled for new job titles. This sequence could be interrupted if one or two things happen. One, that the scale of new job creation falls short of the scale of job destruction. Two, that the intellectual demands of the new skills exceed the intellectual capacity of the displaced workers. These are the precise reasons why the case of AI may be different from other technological changes. I saw a dramatic presentation of this problem in a different context in Pittsburgh in the 1980s. Following the GATT Accord, cheaper steel from South Korea, Japan, and China flooded the US market, and steel plants in the US closed down. The US gained competitive advantage in computer science, robotics, and financial services. The steel plant workers of Pittsburgh could not be retrained in the new sectors, and lived on welfare for the rest of their lives. Large-scale, long-term job destruction may lead to several effects, economic and social. First, the economic effects. Job losses may depress wage levels. Sectors for which some of the displaced workers can be retrained in new job titles may see an increase in output. Whether or not the working class as a whole thereby sees an increase in earnings is an open empirical question. However, many workers would remain at the lower wage levels, their patterns of consumption would shift, and living standard would fall. At the other end, increased profitability due to increase in profits would lead to increased entrepreneurial earnings. Their consumption patterns may also shift as a result, leading to increased demand for luxury goods. However, the entrepreneurial class, being richer, would have a lower propensity to consume than the working class, leading to an increase in the rate of savings and investment. If the investment is directed to AI adopting sectors, the entrenchment of the entrepreneurial class will be enhanced, and immiseration of the workers may decrease. On the other hand, incremental investment will be directed at workers where humans dominate, and this would increase workers' earnings in these sectors. The overall effect cannot be predicted a priori and requires empirical general equilibrium analysis. Second, the social effects. One of the policy steps that has been suggested to address long-term displacement of workers is taxation of the increased entrepreneurial income at a high marginal rate to provide a universal basic income. The political economy of such measures is rather fraught. The empirical class has formidable political clout and would strongly resist the proposed higher taxation. Further, a job or occupation is not merely a source of earnings. It is one's social status, identity, perception of self-worth. Even if earnings losses are addressed by a UBI, loss of these intangible attributes of employment cannot be compensated. Their loss may lead to social unrest, extending to violence directed at the entrepreneurial class. Policy making in this situation is a formidable, complex exercise. It requires a sound theoretical understanding of the problem, as well as broad-based empirical analysis. The limited empirical results available do suggest that adoption of AI leads to net job loss, and for example, was the case in India during the COVID-19 pandemic. At the same time, the considerable benefits of AI must be harnessed. Given the high stakes involved, one must make case slowly, but not engage in laissez-faire. So that's all that I have to say. And now I would invite our six speakers. They are in two groups. And would you like to introduce the speakers?
So today we have amongst us in group one, where we'll be discussing, as Professor Dr. Ghosh had already mentioned, AI and jobs. And for this, we'll have Ms. Pallavi from Ikigai, Dr. Ipshita Roy from NIT Rourkela, and Mr. Shudipta Ghosh. So, Mr. Shudipta Ghosh is a seasoned data and analytics leader at PwC, bringing over 17 years of consulting experience in data and analytics and enterprise performance management. He defines product and solution strategies while spearheading go-to-market initiatives and developing differentiated solutions tailored by industry needs. And Dr. Ipshita Roy, she is an accomplished academic and researcher, currently serving as an assistant professor in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at NIT Rourkela. She has earned her PhD degree from Germany, specializing in economics of innovative change, and has held various prestigious positions, including postdoctoral fellowship at Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. And we have in this panel Pallavi. So Pallavi is a senior associate from Ikigai Law Firm. She is a technology and media lawyer and policy professional with Ikigai Law. She works with leading technology and digital media companies, startups, and industry associations on a variety of issues, including artificial intelligence, platform governance, data protection, and content regulation. So over to all the speakers and Dr. Ghosh for taking this panel forward.
Yeah, so thank you. And let me first invite Mr. Sudipta Ghosh from PwC. Each of the speakers may speak for about 6 minutes, and then we will pose some questions to them, which they could respond to for 2 minutes. So, Mr. Sudipta Ghosh, you have the floor. Not there?
We
Sir,
cannot hear
you
you.
are muted, I guess. Sorry, sir, we are unable to hear you.
Okay, so in that case, we'll wait when he'll have his turn when he comes. And so now we can invite Dr. Ipsita Roy.
Hi, good afternoon. I hope I'm audible to everyone.
Yes, you are audible.
Yes. Okay. So thank you for inviting me for giving this talk on AI and jobs. I would be very honest. I don't have any experience working with AI, so I will give my general observation and opinion, especially from an economic perspective. I have been given the question on AI and how AI can impact addressing the digital divide that we have, and then what AI can do with respect to education and employment. So, for this talk, I have decided to split it into two. I'll keep it very short. So, I have decided to keep two separate ones. So, one with AI and digital divide, and the second with respect to education and employment. And then I'll bring them together. So, what my opinion on AI and digital divide, or what we can do with respect to AI and digital divide, is first understand what it is, what digital divide is. And in the very beginning of this talk, we have had a discussion on digital literacy, and that is something which is very, very crucial to understand what digital divide is. When we are talking about digital divide, it is not just access to computers or access to mobile phones, smartphones, internet, and so on. It's, of course, much more beyond that. Especially in a country like ours, we do need to have digital literacy to actually leverage the effects of AI. That's for sure. Now, when we are talking about digital divide, see, there are many ways of leveraging AI with respect to how to bridge the gap between, let's say, between the different economic units. But we also have to be quite realistic about it. What AI has, or what impact AI has in developed countries may be very different from what we have in a country like ours. We need to also start understanding what kind of problems we have. We have talked about the issues of digital divide and digital literacy, especially in the informal sector. But we also have to acknowledge the high costs of AI, the high costs of advanced technologies, the rural-urban divide that we have. These are some of the issues we have. We do have, you know, we have to consider these issues. Having said that, I do think that there are mainly three areas where AI may have a significant impact. The first being healthcare, and this is something which we have discussed in many policy documents. We have discussed this in economic forums and discussions. Why healthcare is something which should be prioritized, and how AI can play a big role. Now, we do also have many new schemes and new policies that have come up within the healthcare system. We have telemedicine, we have monitoring of health with respect to the apps that we have. There are many things which we do have with respect to advanced technologies. I am from Orissa, for example. Orissa, as you may all know, it's a disaster-prone area. In those kind of areas as well, we do need to have. There are potential for AI to get into real-time monitoring, with respect to climate, with respect to weather, and so on and so forth. So it's not just about health of individuals, but when we are talking about the community as a whole. So in terms of healthcare, access to healthcare, making healthcare accessible, inclusive, low cost, I think AI has a tremendous potential. So this is one area which I think is it's key. The second thing I think is related to community development, community engagement, and this will point towards one of the comments that was made in the very beginning of the discussion, is that informal sector workers may talk about that they do not have access to digital literacy. They do not know how to use digital media. They do not know how to use technologies. I think community engagement is crucial here. Orissa I'll give examples of Orissa. Orissa is a tribal zone. We have a big proportion of tribal population in Orissa, for example, informal sectors as well. So I think when we are talking about AI and the benefit of AI, we need to look into community engagement. We need to look into how AI can go into the very, very deep, regions, but with community engagement, with the help of local NGOs and local organizations at the very ground level. Otherwise, if we just aim at skilling people in the informal sector, or reskilling and skilling people within different sectors without having a proper plan, without going into the very ground level, this makes no sense. So community engagement is very, very crucial. Understanding community engagement, what we can do with respect to community engagement, that I think is very, very crucial. The third thing, and this will also bring me to the second part of the thing, is education. And education and employment, as Professor Ghosh has correctly pointed out in quite detail, the impact of AI and on employment. I am of the opinion that education, when we're talking about education, there has been much discussed on education, higher education, basic education. I do think that there has to be matching with respect to education and employment, and I think AI can provide that kind of matching with respect to education and employment. If people are interested, participants are interested, you can look up employment polarization. There are concepts of employment polarization that we have in economics. We learn about it, and how different tasks and different jobs have different impacts on automation and technology. AI is recent, but automation, as Sir has correctly pointed out, they have existed since centuries. So when we are trying to learn about education and what AI may have an impact on education, we need to understand what kind of education we need for what kind of jobs, and then what kind of jobs are impacted by AI. So it's not uniform for everything. So in this particular case, we can talk about education, we can talk about curriculum development, we can talk about, issues with respect to what kind of changes can be made with respect to, let's say, the curriculum, and with respect to, syllabus and so on and so forth. However, I do think that there are few things which which need to be accounted for when we are talking about education, and where AI has significant potential. One could be language, and that is something which AI has tremendous potential. Language, culture adaptation. We do have now AI technologies which talks about um, text to speech, speech to text. You take a photo and then you're automatically translated, especially in marginalized communities, especially in rural communities. I think that has tremendous potential with respect to language and culture adaptation. Second thing, special education. I definitely would want to point out that in India, we don't have enough reforms for children with disabilities. We don't have enough reforms for um, children with special needs, where AI can be a very big part of promoting education, basic education, and so on and so forth, especially with children or students with special education. Uh, the other thing, and the last thing which I would also like to point out, is matching with jobs. Um, we all know that we have education and employment mismatch in India, and that is something which has in fact gone worse in the last several years. We have unemployment issues. Real-time tracking of the job requirement and the skill requirement is key. There is no such database. We don't have any information to see what kind of jobs are being demanded, what kind of information we have. So we don't know where we are matching. So in terms of job matching, in terms of employment, education matching, I think AI can play a very, very big role in addressing this issue of unemployment, in addressing with this issue with education. Having
Your
said
time
that,
is up, yeah. So
yes,
just wrap up quickly.
yeah. So I just have one more thing to say here, is that, having said everything with respect to AI, I think we need to be also careful and practical in our approach with what AI can benefit. I am of the opinion that the productivity benefits of AI are mostly seen in developed countries. And of course, the effects may be much less pronounced in country like ours. So we have to be realistic in expecting what AI can do and cannot do. So that we have to keep in mind when we are doing these kind of discussions and so on and so forth. So that's all from my side.
Yeah. Thank you, Ipsita, for this wide-ranging presentation. And I think there may be some questions from the participants for you later on. So stay on in the webinar.
Sure.
I think Mr. Sudipta Ghosh has joined us in the meantime. So I would request him to give his presentation. So he should speak for 6 minutes, and hopefully, you know, he, that he would be able to keep to the time. So, Mr. Sudipta Ghosh, you have the floor.
I hope you are able to hear me now.
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful. So thank you very much, Mr. Ghosh, for the opportunity. And since the subject is AI and jobs, so let me give you some perspectives in terms of what I am hearing when I talk to corporates and I talk to many of my clients in my consulting profession. The first thing is that uh, many organizations are going in for a huge aspirational growth. As you would have seen, even from what some of the policies we have seen in the speech regarding the budget, there is a huge focus on the growth, particularly around few sectors, and some of these sectors are doing very well. Now, one of the bottlenecks for that growth clearly is the availability of the skilled people who can drive that growth. The problem becomes even more complex because tomorrow's work requires different kinds of skills than yesterday's work. So we are not just talking about more people who are skilled, we are also talking about more digital skills going forward, because that is what is going to drive some of the initiatives of the organizations today. This is where I feel that AI will play a very substantive role in many ways. The first thing is that it is now possible today for you to tailor the exact need to the specific person and monitor that progress with very little or practically no human intervention and do it at scale. In a country like ours, where we have a huge population and also that population is fairly young and very aspirational, and also spread across in a big geographical area, it is always a challenge to find the right teachers and in right quantities and proportion to ensure that we are able to skill them. This is where AI enabled training curriculum, which is very prescriptive in nature, which looks at the historical trend and pattern of how a student is able to pick up things, will be able to work very closely under, say, the guidance of a professor or a teacher, uh, and will probably do probably help in terms of rolling out the right set of program, whether it is long distance, whether it is in person, or whether it is a program which can be done from a distance. So uh, so there is an opportunity for us to grow as a country, and there is also a need for us to be skilled at scale. And I think this gap can definitely be bridged using the capabilities of AI. That is number one. Number two is that we are looking at different kinds of skills. For example, today there might be a need for a lot of developers and programmers who are able to make their mark in the IT sector or in the IT enabled services IT sector. Going forward, some of these codes and programs will be written by the application itself or by the AI itself. And what will be required at that time is people who are able to understand the business, who are able to play the role of an architect, who are able to design systems and not necessarily be involved in writing a long piece of code. Uh, we believe that this change in the need will actually propel us towards a new category of skills which will be required, probably around prompt engineering, probably around data analysts, probably around system architects, around process specialists, which currently we may not have in good quantities. And that is something which will be an opportunity for many of us to feel very aspirational and move up to or step up to that level of competence. And if you look at the global landscape, there are most of the Western countries particularly are getting are aging. So there is their demographic profile is changing. So, with our demographic profile, we should be able to not just uh, take the jobs from an India perspective, but we can be very, very competitive, capable, and we should seize this in terms of the opportunities which we would get globally. And that is the promise of these new category of jobs. Because I have been given only 6 minutes, I would say that the type of job is going to change, the kind of skills we need is going to change, uh, but what will essentially not change is our ability to learn fast and our ability to experiment and be a little more entrepreneurial and risk taking. And I think if somebody is able to do that, this change would actually be an opportunity rather than a threat. And we are well poised to take this opportunity and not see it as a threat, and it will augur well for us in the medium to long term. So with that, I'll take a pause. We'll be happy to take questions.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Sudipta Ghosh. That was a very positive and optimistic note on which you ended. Now, our final speaker in this session is Pallavi Sondi from Ikagai. So, Pallavi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Ghosh, and thank you everybody for joining. Thank you for having me here on this very important and timely sort of subject that we're all speaking about. I'll be discussing how AI can be used to create opportunities in India's informal sector specifically, and how what steps can be taken to ensure that they benefit from AI while also addressing the challenges that they face. Right. And I'll keep it short so that we have some time for questions as well. So this sort of debate, or this whenever we speak about AI and displacement of jobs, the lens is always looking at it from a developed economy, right? A lot of the literature that we have is on how developed economies will get impacted. But we have to, and I think the previous speakers touched upon this a little bit, that we have to understand that their economies are very different. They have an aging workforce. It's mostly skilled. It's mostly in the formal sector. But for India, it's the opposite, right? I mean, estimates suggest that 90% of our workforce is actually in the informal sector, which is not skilled. We also have a largely youth-based workforce, right? So any sort of debate on AI and workforce has to be seen through this context on how our informal sector actually is. When we speak about AI and the workforce, there are some policy challenges that we come across, and I'm a policy professional. I work with a lot of government folks, startups, etc. And we see a common thread of policy challenges whenever we think about AI adoption in a particular sector. It could be AI in healthcare, AI in finance, and today we are talking about AI in the formal sector. There are certain policy challenges, and the first one being is lack of data. Right, and the recent economic survey also noted that there is really there is lack of data on the informal sector. How many people, what are their wages, do they have access to social security, all of that we don't have that data, and that I think is the biggest roadblock for us to be able to adopt AI in this sector. So the data problem is something that has to be solved. The second, of course, is displacement, or this labor transition, right? And we have studies, we have reports which sort of identify, they forecast what will be these sectors which will be most impacted by this labor transition. And the BPO, the business processing outsourcing sector, and the IT sector has been named as one of those which will be most impacted. And really, we have to at that time think about the fact that about the sector, and are we prepared for this labor transition, right? Have we skilled them enough? Have we trained them? Are they aware? Do they have access? The previous speakers, I think Ipsita spoke about the digital divide. These are all important considerations. And third sort of challenge being is, of course, the problems that are associated with the informal sector as well, right? There's lack of wages, or there are low wages, there's lack of job security, there's limited access to social protection, there is inadequate or sometimes dangerous working conditions. These are some of the issues that actually plague this sector. There are numerous reports which give you these stats that 50% of this of the informal sector earns less than the minimum wage. Only 10% of the informal sector has access to social security schemes. So these numbers really tell you a story, right? The story here being that there are already problems, there are already challenges that this sector is facing, and now we have this force of AI that's here to stay. It's come, it's, announced itself, it's here to stay. And it's, upon us, right, on how we use it. And I think Dr. Ghosh sort of spoke about this, that there are the promises could outweigh the cons depending on how we sort of leverage it. And I always call AI a double-edged sword. I always see it like that. It's there are cons, there are negatives, there are drawbacks, but there are positives, and it's up to us to sort of leverage it like that, leverage that sword in that way. And I think that's the perfect segue for me to speak about the opportunities. We've spoken about the challenges, but what are really the opportunities that AI brings to this sector? And first, the most obvious one is training and skill development, right? And my previous speakers have spoken about this, that is our workforce really skilled, right? And we have numbers around 8 million people enter our labor force every year. There are reports saying that about 120 million workers will have to be trained because of the AI adoption that's going to take place, and the automation that's going to come in certain sectors. So we have to really think about, are we training them? Do we have skill development? Do we have digital literacy programs? We have seen some progress from the government. We have the India AI mission. We have the Skills India mission. We have some future skills program that the government is doing with the industry associations like NASSCOM. So there's been some progress, but a lot more has to be done on this front. And I think this is the time when public-private partnerships can really be leveraged. A lot of these this labor force is also engaged in, like I said, the BPO sector, the IT sector. So public-private partnerships are really the way to go. And we do have some precedents. We have some tech companies who are partnering with, the Ministry of Skills and Development, but a lot more has to be done. And I think this ties back to the data problem, that we can only sort of progress forward when we have adequate data. So that's one. I think economy enabled platforms is a huge opportunity, and this was spoken about before. You have ride sharing, food deliveries, household services, all of these, this huge flourishing, burgeoning sort of gig economy of India. They rely on these technologies, app enabled platforms to be able to find employment, which is stable, regular employment. So AI is a huge opportunity there. A couple of other things that we can do. A big thing is health and safety monitoring. We know that the working conditions of this sector are not safe. They're a lot of times they don't comply with applicable laws. We have the law in place, but we don't see that happening in practice. So AI can be leveraged there to ensure workplace safety, to ensure, especially in hazardous sectors like construction, mining, etc., to evaluate what are the risks, to suggest preventive measures. You have tools, technologies to ensure that workplace comply with labor laws, labor codes. Another thing is efficiency tools, and this is of course spread across most sectors, but more so in informal sector, where we can really use AI to optimize processes. You streamline, let's say, supply chains to be able to reduce costs. And this is the tricky bit, to do it in a way where you're not displacing jobs. And I think this is where the human loop concept comes into play, which is that AI is not going to come replace our jobs. It's going to make it easier. You still need it in a lot of places. You still need a human loop, right? After AI has automated a lot of things, there will be some level of human intervention which is needed. So it should be seen as a way to automate, reduce costs, make things faster, more efficient. But that decision making has to be by a human, because we've seen the sort of fallacies that AI can also enable, which is that thin line that you use AI, you leverage AI, but it doesn't lead to wide scale labor displacement. Another big opportunity is financial inclusion, which a lot of these sectors
Wrap up because your time is up actually. So just wrap up quickly.
Right. I'll quickly sort of wrap up the remaining sort of a financial inclusion and job matching. I think the job matching was about that AI can be really used to help informal sectors get access to credit, savings, insurance, schemes, as well as job matching, which is essentially we connect that data of what people the kind of skills they have versus what's the demand and supply in the market. So that's really sort of the crux, and I'll pause here.
Okay. Thank you, Pallavi. This brings us to the presentation by the three speakers in group one. And now the floor is open for questions, not long comments, but questions from the participants. I think, given the time constraint, we may be able to field at the most 3 questions, but the floor is open. And when you please raise your hand and or raise the flag, whatever it is, and introduce yourself, your name and your organization, and the speaker to whom your question is directed. So it's okay. Pradeep has raised his hand. So Pradeep, you have the floor. Yeah, Pradeep, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I was just listening Pallavi's presentation.
First introduce yourself.
I'm Professor Pradeep Sarkar. I'm basically from the field of transportation, heading the Department of Transport Planning at School of Planning and Architecture. My question is towards Pallavi. Pallavi made a very important point that we do not have the data in the unorganized sector, this informal sectors, and it's very difficult to collect the data. Now, my question is that we have the Google, who are basically trying to get the data in a personal basis also to a great extent. Even I do not know the extent of data can be had as far as the individual is concerned from the Google data, the data systems. So in case if we try to tap the Google data with some collaborative effort, is it possible to generate data on the informal sector so as to fulfill our need and so that we can do the work effectively in terms of policy framing? That's my question.
Okay. Pallavi, question is to you.
Right. Thanks, Pradeep. So just a clarification, when you say Google data, you mean what?
Google, because this in the mobile, Google try to collect the data from all individuals.
Right.
And
Got
we have a huge data bank for most of the people. Most of the people
Correct.
are using.
Understood. Two sort of layers to that question. First, is the informal sector, does it have access to the internet for us to be able to collect their data through platforms like Google? That's one, and that's, I think that spoke about the digital divide. So we need to consider whether they even have access to the internet. Second, of course, for people who do have access, who are sort of entrenched into the digital ecosystem, things can be done. For example, we have the national data sharing framework that the government has come up with, where private sector will share data with the government, and this data will be available for everybody to use for research purposes, academic purposes, etc. So it can be done, but it's not a foolproof method because the digital divide is a real thing. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, of course, a lot of debate is there, but anyway, I don't like to, because paucity of time, I don't like to go further.
Yeah. So can we have a second question? So I don't think there's any of the participants would like to ask a question. And so now, okay, Saraswati Vaidyanathan. Saraswati Vaidyanathan, you go ahead, you have the floor.
Hi, I hope I'm audible. My name is Saraswati Vaidyanathan. I am an assistant professor with the School of Law at BML Munjal University. Thank you for these lovely presentations. It's very insightful. I also had a question to Ms. Pallavi. It's also a follow-up question to what Professor Pradeep asked. Given that she talked about digital divide, and this is something I wanted to understand because working on the policy perspective of AI, one of the things that we came across in our work is that while the digital divide exists, but because of the digital India mission kind of programs, we see that more people actually now have access to internet, and they are using internet, but without really understanding the data sharing concepts, and the consent structures are not very good. So while we advocate that there is not enough data and there should be more data, how do we actually build this consent structure divide that exists, because people don't know what exactly they are submitting their data for and how it is being used? So if she could throw some light on this.
Important question, because Pallavi is a lawyer, and these consent forms are these are in dense legalese. And so how does the layperson, get an understanding of what he or she is signing up to? Pallavi?
Right. So I think you correctly pointed out, one is, of course, the digital divide, but second is also lack of awareness. India is not, and this I'm speaking about everybody, India is not a consent or data privacy literate nation, and not as developed as, let's say, a European Union would be.
Yeah.
We have a long way to go. We've just come up with a data law, but it's not in force yet.
Yes.
Right. But the law is one thing that'll move in its own pace. But what we need more of is awareness, which is why your awareness, your training, your skill development, that comes into play. The Digital India Mission, goals to become a digital economy, all of that will not be fulfilled if people are not aware. And privacy is
Yeah.
not, frankly, one of the core concerns of the Indian population. It's that's not the forefront of their concerns, which has to change, which will change through things like awareness, literacy programs, things like that. So I mean, I don't think I answered your question, but I think that's the problem. But there's a long way for us to sort of find the solution.
All right. Thanks, Pallavi.
Yeah. So Pallavi, just a follow-up question. So do you think there's a role for the government in monitoring or vetting these consent declarations, and then through some process of regulation, some of these declarations may be considered permissible and some may not be considered permissible? Is that an option?
That's already going to happen when the law comes into play, right? Private companies anybody, essentially, any entity who's going to be collecting personal data will have to comply with certain requirements, including a consent form. The government is going to set up a data protection board, right? And any kind of breaches, anything that happens if an entity doesn't take required consent, then complaints will go to the data protection board. So that enforcement mechanism will come into play. The government has sort of already done that. There's been a lot of work that the government has done behind our data law. It's been happening since 2017. So yeah, that it's just a matter of the law coming into force.
Yeah. Okay. So the final question for this is for group one. Anybody? So I think there are no more questions. So let me thank the three participants, three speakers in group one. That is Ipsita Roy, Sudipta Ghosh, and Pallavi Sondi. Thank you very much for your insightful presentations, and particularly Pallavi for fielding the questions that have been asked. So thank you all very much. We will now move on to group two. So, Tasmita, would you like to introduce the speakers for group two?
Sure, sir. Sure. So for the group two, we have the topic selected as AI and enterprises. And we will have Ms. Sangeeta Gupta from NASSCOM, Mr. Satyaki Roy from ISID, and Ms. Anulekha Nandi from ORF. So Dr. Satyaki Roy is an associate professor at the Indian Institute for Studies in the Industrial Development, ISID, New Delhi. He earned his master's degree from Jadavpur University and his PhD from the University of Calcutta. His research initially focused on industrial clusters in India, examining the spatial concentration of production amid late industrialization. Dr. Roy has published extensively on the issues related to labor and employment, structural changes in India, emerging trends in the manufacturing sector, and the political economy for informality. Ms. Sangeeta Gupta, she is the second senior vice president with a robust background of information technology and the service sector from NASSCOM. Throughout her career, she has showcased a comparative skill set encompassing business planning, business intelligence, business development, brand management, and business process outsourcing. Her proficiency and strategic insights have consistently driven business growth and operational excellence in diverse organizational settings. And Ms. Anulekha Nandi, she works as a distinguished fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, ORF, specializing in technology policy, digital innovation policy, and management. Her extensive research encompasses technology's role in the socio-economic development and humanitarian management. With a robust background in information and communication technologies for development and digital rights in India, Ms. Nandi has contributed significantly to the issues like content policy, community data rights, and the application of automated technologies in development. Now I'll ask Dr. Ghosh to take it forward and start with panel 2 discussion. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I will first invite Mr. Satyaki Roy from ISID make his presentation. And all the speakers will have 6 minutes. At the end of 6 minutes, there will be a buzzer which will sound, and then you should wrap up as quickly as possible. So, Mr. Roy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
So, what I basically would try to discuss that what would be the impact of AI in terms of employment, which is a very important issue which is being taken up in this panel. I would say that when we are talking about artificial intelligence, as I understand, it is a simulation of what you can think human thought. And this is something which happened in the early industrial revolution as well, where a process of codification actually codified and standardized physical labor. Now what is happening is a kind of codification of human intelligence. So what the earlier process was appropriating physical qualities into machines, and now it is appropriation of human intelligence into machines. And both of them were disruptive in the sense that, as Schumpeter talked long back, that technology always has this perennial gale of creative destruction. So I would say that even during the first industrial revolution, there was also a lot of displacement that took place. Technologies are always disruptive, and I would say that economists were never very good in predicting the impact of technology and the movement of technology because they are habituated to work with a given production function. But technological developments are always non-linear, and it is very difficult to predict with a given production function that what is actually going to happen. But what I'm also trying to say that this, although they are very much disruptive, and there are a lot of discussions about the kind of disruption that they can create. If we remember Keynes writing in 1930 in his famous essay, Economic Possibilities for Our Grandchildren, where he wrote that he used this term of technological unemployment for the first time. And then we can also see before that Ricardo talking about on machinery and how machines actually replaced human beings in his principles of economics. Later on, Wesley Leontief, he made this prediction that once machines replaced horses, and in the 20th century, machines would be replacing human beings. But actually, it didn't happen like that, in the sense that it is not so linear. If the use of machines would have displaced human beings, no jobs were left today. So what I'm saying that there are always a dual process. One process is, of course, displacement. The other process is reinstatement. Now, how this net effect would pan out depends upon that how technology is being used and how the gains of technology are being distributed. Now, here I will expand a little bit that technological innovation can be of two types. One is which is enabling, in the sense that the introduction of a telescope or a STATA program actually does not kill any job. It increases human efficiency of using something. So there are technologies which actually do not have an impact on job in terms of displacement. They actually create new jobs. But there are technologies which are labor displacing, and most of them are like that because technologies are meant to reduce human effort. So there's nothing wrong in this. Technologies are meant to reduce human effort, so they would replace labor in most of the time. It happened in the earlier industrial revolution as well. But the question is that there is a supplementary process along with the introduction of new technology. One of the most cited example is the introduction of ATM machines. The people who are displaced from banks, cash counters, and the number of people who were absorbed in ATM and related activities, the second was much larger than the number of people displaced. So in certain sectors, you will find that the net effect is much more positive. The supplementary kind of activities related to a technology development has to be relatively more labor using than the technologies where it is being used. In the sense that even in the earlier industrial revolution, you will find that the groups of skills which are being replaced and the groups of skills which are being demanded, these two are completely different. So it is not always easy to reskill the skills and create a redistribution of skills such that people could be absorbed. In a sense that even in the earlier industrial revolution, if you see that it took around 50 years for electric dynamo to become a general purpose technology. It is not that something when it is innovated or discovered, immediately it becomes a general purpose technology. So even now, artificial intelligence has not yet become a general purpose technology, but it is going to be. And it would impact all sectors of economic activities. So the danger lies there that the supplementary activities that would be created, whether they would be much more labor using enough to absorb the displacement that would be created by AI. We do not know what kind of this net effect would come out, because as I said, it is very difficult to predict that what kind of activities would emerge as supplementary, and at the same time, whether they would be more labor using or not. The second important point relating to this, I would say, is the question of distribution. Every technology is meant, as I said, to reduce human effort, and that is the purpose of it. They're supposed to do that. So, but at the same time, the level of consumption of people increases. So if you compare 1915 and 2015, the amount of goods and services consumed by American citizens in 1915 can be produced today in 17 weeks. But that doesn't mean that the rest of the year people are lying down and sleeping, because no new demands have emerged, consumption levels have increased, and that creates new demand. So not necessarily the use of technology necessarily reduces the number of people to be employed, but the question is that if these productivity gains are being created through the use of technology, what kind of distribution that is being created, that is important. Because as productivity increases, the usual economic argument would be that the prices of products would decline. If prices of product decline, even if the income remains same, there would be higher demand for goods and services, and that would, in a multiplier effect, would create more employment. But why it doesn't happen in most of the cases? Because first of all, as I said, that the skill sets which are being replaced and the skill sets which are being demanded are two different sets. The second is most of the time, the productivity gains are not equally distributed. And that is the reason why that you have a kind of polarization. Polarization in the sense that you have very productive, highly educated, technologically equipped workforce. And on the other hand, you have large number of people jobless. We want to find something in the middle. It is not that because of the use of technologies, actually people's working hour could have reduced. That has not happened. Those who are employed, now people are arguing that they should work for 14 hours instead of 8 hours. if actually productivity is increased and the use of technology actually reduces human effort, then the number of working hours of human beings could have reduced in the development of civilization.
Could you please wrap up?
So yes, I'm concluding. So the question is that if it doesn't happen, if the productivity gains are not equally distributed, we always have a polarized kind of outcome where very few people would be very skilled, they would be much more productive, but a large number of people would be thrown out of jobs. So the final point is that the question of technology should be dealt in a way. It was never smooth, in the sense, not for the first time. In the earlier history, we'll find that Britain became the leader of technological revolution because the state was in favor of the mercantile class which emerged in Britain, and they were the torch bearers of new technology. But it didn't happen in case of France, in other parts of Europe. So the impact of technology does not depend upon the nature of innovation only. It depends upon the social contestations that emerge, and that need to be resolved. In the longer context, in a longer term, one would say that every technology is gainful for human beings. There is no doubt about that. But how you mitigate the immediate contestations that emerge of the gains and losses, that is very important, so that we can actually restore or can retain the gains or the potential gains that would be emerging from new technology. So I stop here.
Thank you, Dr. Roy. And I would request you to stick around till we have the Q&A session. So our next speaker is Ms. Sangeeta Gupta. So Ms. Gupta, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure listening to all the diverse perspectives from all the speakers. I think my topic that I was asked to speak on was really, what does AI mean for MSMEs, and what is the impact or opportunity and the risk that the MSME sector holds? A lot has been already talked about, the past evolution of technologies, whether AI will follow in its current form the pattern that we've seen in the past, or will it be completely different? I think the jury's out there. But all I can say is, in the last 30 years of working in the technology sector, I've not seen an era where everybody, not just the technology industry, is so excited and so concerned about what's happening in AI. But just to come back to my topic on MSMEs, right? So clearly, MSMEs are the backbone of India's economy. I don't have all the numbers, but I think the last data point I'd read was, I think, the 20-25% of India's GDP is contributed through the MSME sector. And it's very important to see what the impact AI will have on this sector. I think if I just step back to the Digital India time and the creation of the digital public infrastructure through applications like the UPI, or just marketing channels like WhatsApp, you can already see some positive impact happening, right? So the ability of a micro enterprise to leverage UPI to move from a cash economy to now a more formal economy where his banking, he can get access to credit, or an artisan in a remote area can use WhatsApp marketing to reach almost global customers. So I think in some ways, digitization has provided a fillip to the MSME sector. And as I think about what will AI do on top of that, right? And the use cases are tremendously interesting. So if you can be a manufacturing SME or MSME, you can use computer vision for quality and testing. So we, as NASSCOM, did one example with a pencil manufacturer, and they were struggling with saying, how do I ensure accuracy of all the pencils that we are producing and the sharpeners we are producing, and leveraging computer vision in partnership with a technology startup that we engaged with them. They were able to automate some of that process, which was hugely manual, suboptimal, and not ready for export control. Similarly, if you think about agriculture MSMEs, right? Can you use AI for precision farming? Healthcare, can you use AI for assisted diagnosis? In COVID, we saw how a lot of X-rays in combination with AI were being looked at to say, is there an impact of COVID there? Similarly, for the workers in the MSME sector, if leveraged right, it will free up your time for the workers. I know the previous speaker talked about a 14-hour work week. I don't think that is happening, but there is, while the working hours may not be coming down, the opportunity to do more is just increasing. And I think for MSME sector, it provides a range of opportunities. I want to take a few minutes and I'll stick to my time, but we recently did a survey on AI and SMEs in the technology services sector, since that's the sector we represented. And I think it was a very fascinating thing because the findings, because we would have assumed the technology SMEs are more ready for the AI wave compared to the larger pool of SMEs in the country. So there are just three key findings and the concerns around that we saw. One is that I think almost 90% of them believe that AI has the potential to grow my business. But what were the challenges they rose? One, they said, we don't know what are the contextual use cases since AI is so new right now and all the conversation is everything about the art of the possible. We are not seeing enough in production. So how can we get access to more contextual use cases, either in partnership with the government or other sectors or large enterprises to make it work? The second is lack of toolkits and focus training, right? Again, every day there is a new AI tool getting released. What is it that I should be using? What makes sense for me, right, as an organization? Because I didn't have the luxury of a large enterprise to spend millions of dollars trying to test out everything that's out there. I think third is that even if MSMEs themselves are developing AI solutions, people are hesitant to adopt them because they're saying, I don't know the quality of your solution. So adoption of AI solutions by MSMEs themselves, built by MSMEs, is very low. I think the second priority we saw was that everybody thinks that almost 85% of them said that, use of AI will improve my overall productivity of business. But what were my challenges? And challenge one was data quality issue. Again, I think the previous speakers have talked about access to data and how do you make your AI solutions more efficient, but data was an important issue. Second is I already have some kind of a technology system running in my organization. Will AI talk to that system? I don't have the budgets to go out and invest in another AI solution. Third was clearly lack of expertise, right? I mean, I don't have the resources to be able to find and hire all this fancy talent to be able to do it. And I think just the last part about why they are not able to leverage AI. I think the three areas we saw. One is the talent issue, access to tools issue, what kind of laws and regulations exist in the country. So if I am an exporter today and EU has come up with the AI Act, what do I need to do? How do I comply with that? If India, the digital data protection rules which come into play, what does it mean for my business? So I think they need much more understanding of what does responsible AI mean from my lens, not the complicated lenses that may be out there. I think the second part is, again, the skills shortage issue that we talked about. And I think overall, they have not seen enough examples of peer SMEs who have succeeded with AI. I think just quickly to wrap up, I think what are some of the recommendations we are making? I think there has to be a lot more focus on awareness and training. You cannot expect that everybody will learn on their own. I think in digital, we had a lot of time to do it. In the AI world, I think the speed for action is very important. I think the second is in the access to tools. Singapore has a very interesting example where they have shortlisted tools that SMEs may use and are offering it as a sandbox for MSMEs. Can India look at something similar? Similarly, how do you think about data collaboration? So maybe access to data, some of it will come through the India AI mission and the data pillar that they're calling out. But today, synthetic data can provide some of those answers. So how do we help SMEs build their AI solutions, leveraging access to synthetic data that may be based on some real life use cases? And I think the last is really consistent focus on capacity building. I don't think without that, this will really take off. So I'll stop here and happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Sangeeta Gupta, for your presentation, and kindly stay on for the Q&A session. And our final speaker in group 2 is Ms. Anulekha Nandi from ORF. Anulekha, you have the floor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
Great. Thank you firstly for having me as a part of this panel. Delighted. I'm a fellow at ORF. And the question that was posed to me was to discuss the implications of AI integration for the gig economy in particular. And I wanted to kind of start by reinforcing some of the point made by earlier panelists that the gig economy essentially encompasses a vast array of skills and sectors, really, right? So food delivery, grocery delivery, ride hailing, freelance platforms for content with services like content writing, IT services, secretarial services, etc. So when we think of the implications for AI, it is important that we focus both on the broader implications on the gig economy as a whole, as well as the more granular implications on some of these kind of skills and sectors. Now, the AI revolution is slightly different from the previous rounds of automation because of its impact on white-collar work. In addition to, work, routine and repetitive work in general. So in the US, Amazon and Uber are trialing, autonomous vehicles or riderless deliveries. However, the jobs that are most at risk from AI are stuff like software development and coding. And as we've kind of seen evidence through the mass layoffs, particularly by tech companies. And this kind of has a knock-on effect, really, because a lot of these displaced workers eventually come to swell the ranks of the gig economy in general. And similar kind of jobs that are at risk involve like jobs that involve clerical work, secretarial work, accountancy, etc. And to kind of put this into perspective, some of the more predominant skills on, online freelancing platforms involve those for data entry, involve those for content writing, design, graphic design, IT services, etc. And a lot of the stuff around design, content writing, etc., are particularly at risk with the rise of generative AI, with multimodal capabilities. And the increasing concern that companies might integrate these technologies within their operational processes, thereby kind of bypassing the need for this sort of bite-sized outsourcing of work. And another implication is also the integration of AI within operational processes of these freelancing platforms themselves. And as AI kind of dynamically or continuously passes market information for dynamic pricing, what it also leads to is, fluctuation in income. So the hourly rate fluctuates. And that kind of leads to a form of income instability for gig workers. And all of this happens in the very well-known context of the lack of social safety net for these workers, for gig economy workers particularly. And the design for such social safety nets are further complicated because how do you design a social safety mechanism with portable benefits? Because workers kind of switch across different platforms to optimize their earnings. And so the enduring tension, I think and kind of reinforcing something previous panelists have highlighted, is one of balance. So how do we kind of balance against the efficiency gains as well as the significant threat of job displacement? And there are significant efficiency gains, for example, as someone highlighted, task matching according to skills and preferences. Automating stuff like billing, invoicing, etc. Highlighting areas of personalized growth and development. And increasingly, there are a suite of AI productivity tools that are directed at freelancers, digital financial instruments like business insurance, as well as the rise of digital banks with low cross-border cross-border fees. So I think, I want to just round up by saying that while AI will eventually kind of lead to the creation of more jobs, labor force transformations, etc. I think the challenge that we're confronted with at the moment is how do we kind of mitigate the more short-term socioeconomic implications? So what are the policy level objectives that we should prioritize, whether it is in the form of reskilling, upskilling, social security design, etc., to kind of mitigate the kind of immediate and more short-term fallouts. So yeah, I would like to kind of end with that and thank the rest of the panelists for their insights, and I learned a lot.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Anulekha. So we've had 3 very insightful presentations covering a wide field in this broad area of AI and enterprises. And so now the floor is open to the participants for questions. Please identify your institutional affiliation and pose your question to one or the other of the panelists. Please do not make long comments. Thank you. So I see Pradeep has raised his hand. So Pradeep, you have the floor. So Pradeep, please unmute yourself.
Yeah. My question is to Dr. Roy as well as just Ms. Anulekha Nandi. They have well demonstrated the fact that because of the AI, there is going to be a displacement of jobs, there's a loss of jobs, and ultimately, of course, on the other hand, we see that the huge benefit to the country in terms of economic development. The question is, Anulekha has said very clearly how to balance it. That's the challenge. Now, I was just wondering that has any developed countries worked out any kind of white paper to understand that in case of these are the AI technology likely to come in different sectors of economy, then what would be the practically challenges, how we have to mitigate, and the job displacement which is going to take place, how this is going to be ultimately addressed through creation of better job, creation of different kind of other job. So has any work has been done so that we can understand that we can take initiative, because AI is the transition stage right now. Once this white paper is properly done based on the experience, best practices in other countries, perhaps it will provide a good guidelines. Has a kind of initiative been done in any country? That is my question.
Okay, so this is a question to Dr. Roy and to Ms. Nandi. So, Dr. Roy, would like to go first?
Okay, so I would say that what you were actually asking for, that exactly, is there any white paper or some study which looks into the impact of AI on employment? I would suggest some, but I will share those. But I would say that three things which Anulekha has mentioned. One is that the major impact so far in the advanced economies is basically in the middle-level jobs. So those were repetitive, which can be actually codified in terms of an appropriated through computers and can be done easily, understanding the patterns of data. So this is one. So the middle-level jobs would be actually, ILO did a study, which of course says that about 70% of the middle-level jobs would be destroyed in advanced economies. And the impact, of course, would be higher in case of India. But it is, as I said, that it is very difficult to say what would be the combined impact of the positive and negative effects. Because most of the time, what you can see that how a particular sector is being affected, you can say that this sector is losing, people would be losing jobs from this sector. But we do not take into account that what are the new jobs that have been created. And this is a dynamic process. It is very difficult to assess that exactly what is going to happen. And two things I would say, that one response, which Professor Ghosh mentioned in the beginning, and why this has come in the advanced economies, this universal basic income. The reason is that it is true that gradually the necessity of direct labor, whether it is skilled or unskilled, in the process of production is gradually declining because of the use of technology. Now, the point is that actually does not give purchasing power to a large section of the population who would buy the goods and services which are being produced. So the solution that is coming out in most of these developing economies, that you push some money to the pockets of the consumers so that they can buy the goods and services which have been created. Of course, this is not a solution to create productive employment, but what I'm saying, the reason why UBI is becoming popular, for the simple reason is that the current level of production is not capable of creating that much of employment which is required to keep that balance which Anulekha mentioned. So this is from my side.
So Anulekha, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir, for the question. And I think so quite extensively covered most of the comments. So I'll just add a little bit. In terms of use cases, if we were to think of social security, there are Scandinavian countries have made certain strides due to protests by aggregators, etc. But I think what is encouraging perhaps at a policy level in our own country is if we look at the expert group report of the India AI expert group report, there's a significant section on skilling and skill development, and not just immediate, but a more longer term perspective, kind of integrating AI education within curricula from secondary school level and upwards. So I think that intention, and perhaps if that is read in conjunction with the national education policy, gives hope and encouragement in terms of raising the skill level that we eventually need, that would need to be met with the diverse kind of skill requirements that AI poses now and in the future.
Thank you. And we just have time for one more question. So who would like to raise his or her hand? I don't see any raised hands. So I think let us now wrap up this webinar. Let me thank all 6 speakers this afternoon for their very insightful presentations. They have covered a very wide ground with both the promise and the challenges of AI, and particularly the whole question of jobs and skilling, and the promise of AI with respect to jobs and skilling, but also the potential for AI to displace in the long term a great deal of employment. And some speakers have mentioned about the solutions, but I think that is a issue that is very complex in itself, and perhaps that will have to await another webinar. So let me hand over the floor now to Tasmita. Tasmita, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, sir. I would request Varidhi Singh, one of my colleague and advisor at CUTS, to give her vote of thanks and closing remarks. Over to you, ma'am.
Thanks, Tasmita. I hope I'm audible to all of you, and I would really like to thank, first of all, our moderator, Dr. Pradipta Ghosh. So thank you very much. You have seamlessly moderated the session and led the whole discussion. And I would also like to thank all our esteemed panelists, because this has been a very timely discussion. And as we all have honestly accepted that we don't know all the solutions, but timely discussion is also important, and that will somehow lead to some of the solutions, I believe. So once again, thank you all the panelists, and thank you, Dr. Ghosh, for moderating the session. And I would also like to thank Sanchita and Tasmita for taking the initiative on organizing this timely webinar. So once again, thank you all. One more thing I would like to say, that we have organized this discussion, and initially we were having 4 speakers, but seeing the importance of this webinar, we have got a request from many speakers, and we are really sorry that because of challenge of time constraint, we have not been able to accommodate all those. So apologies for that, but next time we would like to make a more detailed, in-depth session, so a lot of people could get an opportunity to share their ideas. Also, I would like to thank all
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.